They said, "Stay here for a few days, Mum. We'll pick you up after the wedding." But when I woke up the next morning, the house was quiet. No note, no text. Just a locked door and someone else's shampoo in the shower. That's how I knew I hadn't been invited. I'd been placed. It was a small beige rental on the edge of a town I didn't recognize. My purse sat on the kitchen counter, but my phone was gone. Just gone. My clothes were neatly folded in a duffel bag by the couch. No hangers, no coat. My knees ached from sleeping upright. The air smelled like unfamiliar detergent and old paint. I opened the front door, hoping for something. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a cab. But instead, I found a woman watering petunias 2 houses down. She looked up and smiled like she already knew me. "Oh, you're Marilyn, right? They left hours ago," she said, like she was talking about a weather report. "Said you'd figure it out." I nodded. Not because I understood, but because that's what women like me do. We nod and make things easier for everyone else. I closed the door and sat down on the couch. My legs shook. I wasn't sure if it was from cold or disbelief. The coffee maker blinked 12 was. I didn't know how to use it. At some point I stood. I tried to remember how to move like someone in control. I washed my face in the unfamiliar sink, tied my hair back with a rubber band I found in the bottom of my bag. I checked the cupboards. A can of soup, a box of crackers, 2 mugs with faded tourist slogans. That was all. By noon, I had knocked on 3 doors. No one answered the first 2. The third belonged to a man in his 50s who looked like he didn't want to be bothered. "I don't know," he said, arms crossed. "They said you'd only be here a week. Something about needing space." Needing space. I held that phrase like a stone in my mouth, rolled it around, tasted the weight of it. I sat on the front steps until the sun moved past the trees. No taxis passed. No mail came. I had no phone, no address book, no numbers memorized. Just my name, my bag, and the fading echo of my daughter's voice telling me this was just a few days. By evening, I'd eaten the crackers. I tried the soup but couldn't open the can. I didn't cry. I just sat there, listening to the house hum around me like it was waiting for someone else. I fell asleep on the couch again, wrapped in a throw blanket that smelled faintly of bleach and something floral. I dreamed of nothing. The next morning, I opened the door again. The woman with the petunias was back. She waved. "You okay in there?" she asked. I didn't lie. "I don't know." She came over with a pitcher of iced tea and a plate of muffins. "Well," she said, setting them down, "then let's figure it out." That was the first time in 2 days someone looked me in the eye, and it was the first time I felt something shift. Not around me, but in me. It was small, but it was mine. The tea was too sweet, and the muffins were dry, but I ate like I hadn't tasted food in days. Maybe I hadn't. The woman's name was Margaret. She was 82, wore her lipstick crooked, and called me darlin', in a voice that sounded like gravel and bourbon. She said she'd lived next door for 30 years and knew a planted guest when she saw one. "They left you here like a dropped-off casserole," she said. "No note, no number. Just set you down and drove off. That ain't kindness, darling, that's disposal." I didn't correct her. I couldn't. Margaret brought me a phone, not a smartphone. One of those clunky things with plastic buttons and a curly cord. "Hooked to the wall," she said. "No one can take this one without yanking the drywall out." I called my daughter first, straight to voicemail, then her husband. He answered. "Oh," he said. "Hey." Just that. No panic, no apology, no, "Are you okay?" "Where are you?" I asked. "In Tahoe," he said. The wedding's tomorrow. We'll touch base after the weekend. Touch base, I repeated. Do you know my phone is gone? Do you know I have no way to get home? He sighed. That long, lazy kind of sigh people use when they're pretending to be tired instead of guilty. Look, Lisa said it was best this way. You needed a break. You've been tense. I've been tired, I said calmly. There's a difference. Same thing, he muttered and hung up. I held the receiver a long time before I set it down. Margaret didn't ask for details. She just poured me more tea and told me about her late husband, who'd once left her in a supermarket parking lot because she took too long in the bread aisle. He came back, of course, she said, but I made sure he never forgot it. How? She smiled. Took the car keys every Sunday for the rest of our marriage. We sat on her porch until the wind picked up. She offered me her guest room, but I declined. I didn't want to get comfortable. Not here. Not yet. Back inside the rental, I looked around with new eyes. There were no family photos, no clutter, just a couch, a table, and a bed that looked slept in but unloved. I opened drawers. Most were empty. One held a broken flashlight and a business card for Ron's appliance repair. Another had a spiral notebook with torn pages. In the bedroom closet, behind a stack of old towels, I found a dusty shoebox. Inside was a single envelope. My name, handwritten in ink that had started to fade. It was my aunt's handwriting. I sat on the bed, legs trembling. She had lived in this town, died years ago. I hadn't been able to attend the funeral. Lisa had her first baby that week, and everything else became less important. I opened the envelope. Inside, a yellowed receipt from a local bank, a photocopy of a deed, and a small Polaroid of the house I was now sitting in. On the back, in my aunt's delicate script, "For Marilyn, if she ever needs it." I stared at it a long time. Then I folded the papers back, returned them to the box, and slid it under the bed. The wind howled that night. I curled under the blanket, fully dressed, heart thudding against my ribs. At 2:37 a.m., I woke to a noise. A creak, then a knock. I opened the door. Margaret stood there, wrapped in a shawl. "I remembered something," she said. "That house, your aunt's? It was never sold. She left it in her will. Folks said the niece never came for it." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, but I wasn't. Not yet. I was something else entirely. I was starting to remember. I rose before the sun. The sky was still dark, but my mind was wide awake. I hadn't slept deeply. My body was restless, with thoughts I hadn't let myself think in years. I made a cup of tea with the last of the water from the kettle Margaret left, and I sat on the porch steps wrapped in a blanket, watching the town yawn into morning. The house didn't feel like a stranger anymore. It didn't feel like mine, not yet, but it didn't push me out either. There's a difference. Some places have an air about them, like you're only allowed to stay on borrowed time. This house, my aunt's house, felt like it was waiting for me to notice something. I began with the photo. The Polaroid was faded, but the details were there. The white paint chipped at the corners, the old porch swing still hanging by one chain, the small rose bush in front that now looked wild and unkempt. That bush. I'd helped plant it when I was 17. I remembered the thorns, the dirt under my nails, my aunt laughing as I complained about ruining my jeans. I hadn't thought of that moment in over 50 years. I turned the photo over again. "For Marilyn, if she ever needs it." I needed it now. Inside the box, beneath the bank receipt and the photocopy of the deed, was a scrap of lined paper. A list in that same careful handwriting. Local attorney, Harper and Low Property Tax ID 483721. Key left with Margaret. Tell her to forgive herself. I didn't cry. I just held the paper in my lap, as if it might warm me from the inside out. At 9 a.m. sharp, I knocked on Margaret's door. She answered in slippers and a scarf tied over her curlers. I need to ask you something, I said. She squinted. Is it about the key? Yes. I figured you'd come eventually. She didn't ask questions, just went into the kitchen and returned with a small tin box. It had once held cookies. Now it held a single brass key on a blue plastic tag. I thought it was a joke, she said, handing it over. Your aunt gave it to me the year before she passed, said you might show up one day needing it. Did she say why? Margaret shook her head. She just said, Marilyn won't ask for help until she's already drowning. And by then, she won't call it drowning. She'll call it managing. I nodded. That sounded like her. With the key in my hand, I returned to the rental. No hesitation this time. I unlocked the back door. It creaked open like it had been waiting years. The back room was darker than the front. Dust covered the windowsills. The wallpaper had peeled at the edges, and the light switch clicked but brought no glow. Still, I walked in. The air was stale but familiar, like old books, lemon polish, and something sweet, maybe lavender. My aunt's scent, softened by time. I opened a drawer in the hallway cabinet and found a stack of utility bills from 15 years ago. All addressed to her name, this address. None marked as final notices. The last bill dated 2010. After that, silence. In the bedroom closet, a box of clothes, neatly folded, too small for me, and scented with old sachets. I held a cardigan to my chest and closed my eyes. Then I found it. A small fireproof safe beneath the bed. It was locked, but I knew the combination. My birthday, her way of never forgetting. Inside, the original deed. Stamped, signed, filed with the county clerk, and my name listed as the heir. I sat on the bed and placed the papers in my lap. All those years of being called a guest, of being told, just for now, just until, only a few days. And all along, I'd owned something no one thought I'd remember to claim. I looked around the room again. No, this wasn't a rental. It wasn't a placeholder. This was my house. And I wasn't going anywhere. Margaret had a way of talking that made you forget what time it was. She could start with something simple, how cold the milk had been that morning, and end up recounting a story about breaking into her own car with a wooden spoon in 1979. She was like that, roundabout but sharp. I liked her immediately. After I showed her the deed, she didn't react with surprise, just nodded slowly, like something she'd long suspected had finally been confirmed. So, she said, pouring more tea into our mismatched mugs. You gonna stay? Or you still waiting on the people who forgot they dropped you? I didn't answer right away. The truth sat in my chest, like a stone that hadn't decided whether it was grief or relief. I'm not sure yet, I said. Feels like if I stay, I'm giving up on them. Giving up? She scoffed. Darling, they gave up first. You're just catching up. We were sitting in her sunroom, plastic-covered chairs, dusty lace curtains, a cat that stared like he knew every secret I'd never spoken aloud. I reached for a biscuit and let her words settle. I used to run a bookstore, I said finally. Before Lisa was born. I kept the books, dealt with suppliers, even did the tax forms by hand every quarter. Margaret looked impressed. You were the boss. I was, I said, surprised by how strange that word felt now. I closed it after my husband got sick. Lisa was 12. It was too much. You were too much, she said gently, So they chipped away at you. I nodded, not because she was right, though she was, but because hearing it out loud made it real. I told her about the years after my husband died, how Lisa insisted I move in with them. "It'll be easier," she said. "We'll all be together." And I believed her. At first, it was sweet. Tea left on my nightstand, little jokes about me joining their book club. Then came the edits. My soap smelled too strong. My meals were too salty. Could I keep my knitting out of sight when guests came? Eventually, I became invisible, present, but not welcome. Margaret listened the way only an old woman can, with her whole body still and her eyes never looking away. "I remember the first time they went on vacation without telling me," I said. "I was just there, in the house. No groceries, no key to the mailbox, no idea where they went. 3 days before Lisa called. And you stayed," she said. I stayed. "Why?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She leaned back in her chair. "You know what I did when my son tried to put me in one of those luxury senior communities? I sold the condo I co-signed for. He found out when the papers were already filed." I raised an eyebrow. He must have been furious. "He was," she smiled. "But you know what? He started calling me by my name again. Margaret. Not Mom, please. Not Mother, stop. Just Margaret, like I was a person again." The kettle hissed from the kitchen. Neither of us moved. I thought of my daughter, of her silence. Her voice, when it came, was always sweet, but clipped, like she was balancing a tray she hoped I wouldn't add to. "We'll call in a few days," she'd said. That was a week ago. Margaret broke the quiet. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're not lost, Marilyn. I think you're just out of practice." I looked down at my hands. The veins were more visible now, the skin thinner, but they still worked. They still knew how to hold things. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I picked something up again. The attorney's office was in the old part of town, wedged between a florist with wilting roses and a shoe repair shop that looked like it hadn't seen leather since the 90s. The brass plaque read Harper and Lowe in faded serif letters, the kind of lettering that hadn't changed since typewriters ruled the world. I stepped inside just before noon. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and paper. A young receptionist, 20 maybe, and already bored with life, looked up from her phone. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but I think someone left me something here. Years ago." She blinked. "Your name?" "Marilyn Shaw. My aunt's name was Lorraine Petters." The girl typed slowly, like each key had to be convinced. Then she paused. "One moment." She disappeared behind a frosted door. I heard muffled voices, the shuffle of papers, a cough. Then the door creaked open, and an older man in a sweater vest appeared. He had a kind face, the sort that wasn't trying to sell you anything. "Mrs. Shaw?" he said. "I'm Daniel Lowe. Please, come in." His office was cluttered but cared for. A wall of books, a worn leather chair, framed diplomas from a state college. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Your aunt left something with us," he said, folding his hands. "A will. We tried to contact you after her passing, but we never received a response." I exhaled slowly. I didn't even know she'd made one. "She passed in 2011. The house on Elm Street was deeded to you. The taxes have been paid through a trust she set up. We assumed you weren't interested." "I didn't know," I said again, softer this time. He pulled out a manila folder. "It's all here. The house is legally yours. Fully paid off. No liens. The deed was recorded under your name as of July 2011. I stared at the papers. Black ink on white. My name. My aunt's signature. A tiny stamp from the county recorder's office. All that time I'd been a guest in someone else's house. I'd owned a home I'd forgotten. May I take a copy? Of course. He slid the papers across. There's one more thing. From the folder, he pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with tape instead of glue. My name again, this time in my aunt's looped cursive. I opened it slowly. Inside, a letter. Just one page. Marilyn, if you're reading this, it means you've come back. I hope the world has been kind, but I suspect it hasn't. You were always strong. Too strong sometimes. That's why I left you the house. I knew you wouldn't ask. You never did. This home is yours. Not because of blood or law, but because I loved you. You were my beginning and my end. If you've been forgotten, remember yourself. If you've been left, return. You belong here, even when you think you don't. Love, Lorraine. My hand shook as I folded the letter back into the envelope. Mr. Lowe said nothing, just waited. When I stood, he did too. What will you do now? He asked. I smoothed the front of my coat. I think I'll stop waiting for someone to remember me and start remembering myself. He smiled. That's usually when things change. Outside, the street was the same. Potholes, a wind chime tinkling in the distance, a woman walking her dog with a coffee cup in hand. But I felt taller, not because the world had shifted, because I had. The key fit like it had never left. It turned with a soft click, and I stepped inside. Not as a guest, not as a woman waiting on someone else's goodwill, but as someone returning to something rightfully hers. The house felt different. Not bigger, not cleaner, just clearer. The hallway that once smelled of mothballs now carried a faint scent of dust and time. The curtains I remembered from childhood were gone, but the light still pooled on the floor in the same familiar pattern. The floor creaked in the same places, like a voice whispering, "You remember." I stood in the center of the living room, listening. The silence was not empty. It was layered. It had depth. It wasn't the silence of being ignored. It was the silence of space that finally belonged to me. There were cobwebs in the corners, the paint had peeled, but the bones were strong. My aunt had said it often. It's not the polish that makes a home, it's the spine. And this house had a spine. I spent that afternoon with a sponge in one hand and an open window in front of me. I cleaned slowly, deliberately, not to erase the past, but to uncover it. Under a pile of old linens in the hallway closet, I found a photograph tucked into a paperback. My aunt, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow knit blanket. Me. I sat on the floor for a long time, the photo in my lap, the house breathing gently around me. It wasn't until I reached the kitchen that I found the note taped to the inside of the pantry door. The ink was smudged, but still legible. If you're here, then good. You've found your way. Don't give it away again. Not even in pieces. I hadn't realized I had. Not in one moment, anyway. But in small ways, every time I said, "It's fine," every time I folded towels I didn't use, or apologized for taking up a room someone else wanted, I'd given myself away, inch by inch. Not anymore. The next morning, I walked to the edge of town and visited the small post office. The woman at the counter wore a name tag that read Anita and a sweater with candy canes stitched into the sleeves. "I'd like to open a box," I said. She slid a form across the counter. "Name?" "Marilyn Shaw." She looked up. "You from around here?" "Just got back." Afterwards, I stopped by the corner diner. It hadn't changed. Same cracked vinyl booths, same smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee. I ordered eggs and toast and read through the real estate listings in the local paper. Not because I wanted to move. I just wanted to see what else had lasted this long. The waitress brought my bill with a smile. "Haven't seen you here before." "I used to visit," I said, "a long time ago." "Well, welcome back. Hope you're staying." I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet. Back at the house, I made a list. Not a to-do list, not chores, just questions. Who do I need to call? What do I keep? What do I owe? What do I deserve? It was the first time in years I'd asked myself anything without framing it through someone else's comfort. Later that evening, I called Margaret. "Do you remember a roofer?" I asked. "Gary Olin, retired now. Why?" "I think the back porch is sagging." She laughed. "You really are staying, huh?" I looked around the room, at the cleaned floor, the open curtains, the photograph on the mantel. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." I didn't tell Margaret about the deed. Not yet. Something in me wanted to hold that knowledge close a while longer, like a warm stone in my coat pocket. Not to keep it secret, but to let it settle. It had been so long since anything truly belonged to me that I wasn't sure how to carry it. Instead, I focused on the house. I walked through it slowly each morning, room by room, sponge and notebook in hand. The fridge had long since died, its motor a silent thing now, but the stovetop still lit with a patient click and hiss. I cleaned each surface, not with the frantic polish of someone trying to impress, but with the quiet attentiveness of someone coming home. In the front room, I found an old cedar chest tucked beneath the window bench. Inside were blankets, a pair of well-worn gloves, and a sealed envelope marked Utilities. It held receipts, dozens of them, from 20 years past. Every bill paid in cash, every note signed with my aunt's looping initials. She hadn't just kept the house ready, she'd kept it loved. That afternoon, I made soup with what little I had in the pantry and brought half of it to Margaret. She met me on the porch with her arms crossed and a smirk. "That's my pot, isn't it?" "It might be." She took it with a nod. "You coming in?" I hesitated. Then I stepped inside. Her home smelled of wood polish and peppermint. The walls were lined with framed photos, not posed, not staged, just life as it had unfolded. Grandchildren in Halloween costumes. A younger Margaret in bell-bottoms, hair big and wild. A photo of a man, worn around the edges, tucked beside a ceramic dish of keys. "He was a kind man," she said, catching my gaze. "Not perfect, but kind." We sat at her kitchen table, the same one I'd wiped my hands on 2 nights earlier. She poured tea and unwrapped a tin of shortbread. "So," she said, "you gonna tell me what you're doing with that house?" "I don't know yet," I said. "Liar," she replied, smiling. "You're already making lists. I can see it in your eyes." I laughed, because she wasn't wrong. I told her bits and pieces, about the envelope, about the letter. Not everything, but enough. She listened the way she always did, with her mouth closed and her heart open. "I think I want to keep it," I said finally. "Not just live there. Keep it. For something." She raised an eyebrow. "Something? For someone like me?" That silenced her for a moment. "You mean someone they forgot?" I nodded. She tapped her spoon against the rim of her cup. "That's not a bad idea." "It's not a good one yet, either." "No," she said. "But it's yours, and that counts for more than you think." When I returned home, yes, home, I took the long way through the front yard. The rosebush I'd helped plant was half dead, choked in weeds and brittle from neglect. But at its base, beneath the mess, a single red bud had started to form, small, fragile, stubborn. I stared at it for a long time, and then, without ceremony, I bent down, pushed back the thorns, and started pulling weeds, one by one. By the time the sun began to set, my hands were dirty, my knees sore, and the bush was breathing again. Not whole, not healed, but visible. That night, I slept in the old bed upstairs. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. It rained the next morning. A quiet, steady kind of rain that softened everything it touched. I sat on the porch, wrapped in my aunt's old shawl, watching the drops gather on the banister like they had somewhere to be, but weren't in a hurry. Margaret showed up just after 9 with a basket and a frown. "You haven't eaten, have you?" I had tea. She pushed past me into the kitchen, muttering about blood sugar and old women who forget they're still alive. From the basket, she pulled out hard-boiled eggs, sliced bread, and a jar of peach preserves. "You need protein," she said, handing me a plate. "And stop looking like you're waiting for a knock that won't come." I sat, ate slowly. She didn't press. Just stood at the window with her hands resting on the sink, watching the garden soak. "You know what I miss?" she said after a while. "The sound of someone calling my name just because they wanted to. Not for help, not for chores, just to say it." I swallowed my bite. It's been a long time for me, too. We spent the morning sorting through a box of old linens. My aunt had kept everything: doilies, table runners, handkerchiefs embroidered with initials I couldn't place. Margaret held one up to the light and chuckled. "This was stitched drunk," she said, pointing at a crooked flower. "And I love it more because of that." We laughed then, real laughter, not polite or performative, the kind that fills a room like warm air. I realized I hadn't heard myself laugh in years. As the rain slowed, we moved to the front room. I showed her the framed photograph I'd found, the one of me as a baby. "Your mother or your aunt?" she asked, tapping the edge. "Aunt Lorraine," I said. "My mother left when I was 7. Lorraine stepped in." "She raised you?" I nodded. "No wonder she left you the house." "She didn't have anyone else. No kids of her own." Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe she didn't want kids of her own. Maybe she just wanted you." The words caught something in my throat. I turned away and busied myself with folding. By noon, the sun had returned. Margaret stood and stretched. "You know," she said, brushing crumbs from her blouse, "this house could hold more than just your silence." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time to stop being the only one in it." I looked around. The rooms were clean now, the windows open, the air no longer stale. And she was right. It didn't feel like a hiding place anymore. It felt like a beginning. That evening, I wrote a letter. Not to Lisa. Not yet. This one was to myself. It started simply. "You were never a guest. You were just waiting to be remembered." And maybe that was what I needed most. Not permission, not apology, just a way to say, "You still belong," even if no one says it out loud. I didn't plan to write to Lisa. I didn't sit down with an outline or a speech in mind. It just happened. One evening, at the kitchen table, with a pen I found in a drawer and the last page of my aunt's old notepad. The kind with flowers printed in the corner, like a polite frame for things we're too afraid to say plainly. I didn't ask how she was. I didn't start with "Dear." I just began. "You left me in a town I hadn't been to in decades. No phone, no way home. You didn't forget. You decided. That's different." The words came slowly, carefully, not angry, just clear. "I raised you with hands that didn't know rest. I said yes more times than I should have. I kept quiet when you needed someone to argue with. And when your father passed, I let the grief make me small so you could still feel safe. I didn't move in with you because I was lost. I moved in because you asked, because you said we'd be closer. But I became a shadow in your house, a whisper in the hallway. Someone to fold laundry, but not speak too loud. Cook, but not season too much. Smile, but only in the kitchen. You didn't say, get out, but you said, it's just for a few days. You said, after the wedding. You said, we'll figure it out. You said nothing else. I paused there. My hands shook, not from weakness, just from the weight of finally telling the truth. I'm not coming back. This house is mine. It always was. Your great-aunt left it to me because she knew I'd forget to ask for things, knew I'd try to earn what was already mine. I'm not angry. I'm awake. I didn't sign it. I didn't seal it. I just folded the page once and placed it beside the telephone in case I ever needed to say it out loud. Later that night, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. Her voice bright, clipped, rehearsed. Hey, Mum. Just checking in. Hope everything's okay. We'll be home Tuesday. Let's talk then. There was no apology, no question, just her schedule. I played it twice, not to be sure I heard it right, but to be sure I felt it wrong. Then I erased it. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for choosing silence. I felt whole, like someone who'd stopped waiting for recognition and started remembering her own name. The next morning, I called Mr. Lowe. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm, steady, the kind of voice that didn't flinch when a woman like me said, I'm ready. I want to put the house in order, I said. Legally, financially, permanently. He didn't ask why, just said, come in this afternoon. Bring the deed. I walked to his office with the folder tucked under my arm, heart steady, mind sharper than it had been in years. He cleared a spot on his desk, pushed aside the mug of cold coffee, and laid out the forms like a deck of cards. I'd like to retain full ownership, I said. No transfer, no trust. Just my name. Simple. He nodded. And? I want to make sure it stays mine, even if something happens to me. You want to name a successor? Not yet, I said. Right now, I just want protection. He pulled out a form. We can file a declaration of ownership with intent of use. That keeps it from being reassigned without your direct consent. Good, I said. I want that. I signed slowly, deliberately, reading every line before the pen touched paper. Each signature felt like a return, not to youth, but to control, like locking a door from the inside. He glanced up when I finished. Anything else? Yes, I said. I want to put in a request for a zoning review. He blinked. Zoning? I want to see if this property can be designated for shared living, not a business, not a facility, just multiple adults, quiet ones. He studied me. You're thinking of opening it. Not to the public, just to people like me, people who were asked to stay somewhere, just for a few days, and never asked back. He leaned back in his chair. I've seen a lot in 30 years. But this? It's not charity, I said. It's restoration. All right, he said. Let's start the process. The paperwork took an hour. By the end, my hand ached, but my spine felt straighter. When I stepped outside, the air smelled of cut grass and dry pavement. Across the street, two boys chased each other with paper airplanes, their laughter spilling into the sky like music. I smiled, not because I knew them, but because the world hadn't stopped. It had simply waited for me to catch up. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. No flowers in the margins this time, just lines. I wrote, House rules. You don't owe anyone an apology for getting old. You may sit in silence as long as you like. No one touches your things without asking. Meals are shared, Not expected. We remember birthdays, even the ones you try to hide. You do not need to earn your place. I folded it and tucked it into the drawer beneath the sugar jar. Maybe someday it would hang on the wall. Maybe it would be passed from hand to hand like a recipe. But for now, it was enough to write it, to say it, to mean it. The first woman showed up 3 days later. Her name was Teresa. She was 76, soft-spoken, wore a green windbreaker zipped all the way up to her chin, and clutched a canvas tote like it was a shield. Margaret sent her. "She's not trouble," Margaret had said. "Just tired of being where she's not welcome." Teresa stood at my door for a long time before speaking. Her hands trembled. Her eyes darted from the porch railing to the chipped welcome mat, then to my face. "I can leave if it's too much," she said. I stepped aside. "Come in." She carried a single suitcase and a rain-stained folder. Inside, a birth certificate, a social security card, a faded photograph of a baby boy in a sailor suit, and a letter, handwritten, torn in the corner. "I was staying with my daughter," she said quietly as she sat at the kitchen table. "She said I could help with the grandkids. And I did. School drop-offs, lunches, laundry. I cleaned while they worked, cooked while they relaxed. But then her husband got a new job, and they needed the room." She didn't cry. She just folded her hands. I asked where I should go. She said I'd figure it out. Then she left me at the bus station with $40 and a bag of granola bars. I poured her tea. Mint, like always. She drank it slowly, like she hadn't been offered a cup in years. That night, she took the spare room upstairs. I gave her a fresh set of sheets and let her unpack in silence. I heard the soft thud of her suitcase opening, the rustle of careful hands smoothing fabric. In the morning, I found her in the garden, standing in her robe, staring at the rose bush. She didn't touch it, just watched it, the way someone might watch the ocean, not expecting anything, just needing to know it was still there. A few days later, another woman came. Gloria, 81, wore red lipstick like armor. She arrived with a cab receipt and a bruised elbow from tripping on her son's porch steps. "They didn't want me to come," she said, not bitter, just factual. "But I told them if I stayed, I'd forget how to use my own voice." She brought 3 sweaters, a jar of pickled beets, and a book of poems with half the pages dog-eared. Her first night, she made stew for all of us. It tasted like something remembered, not followed from a recipe. Soon, the kitchen calendar had names scribbled into the meal slots. Teresa liked Tuesdays. Gloria liked Fridays. I didn't assign. I invited. We took turns walking to the post office, bringing back bills and circulars. We folded laundry in the sunroom. Margaret came over once a week and brought scones no one liked but everyone ate. One night, as we sat by the fire, Gloria said, "I don't think I've ever lived with women before. Not really. Not just women." Teresa nodded. "It's like breathing without being watched." I said nothing. I just listened. Because some things didn't need answers. They just needed space. And now, finally, we had it. The phone rang just past noon. I was shelling peas by the back window, the kind of quiet task that lets the mind wander. Gloria was upstairs napping. Teresa was writing postcards at the table, even though she never mailed them. I picked up on the 3rd ring. "Mom?" Lisa's voice. Thin, breathy, the kind of voice you use when you've practiced sounding composed in the mirror, but forgot how anger cracks beneath control. "I've been calling. You haven't answered?" "I know. I left messages." "I know that too." She was quiet for a second, maybe waiting for me to say I missed her or explain where I'd gone. But I didn't owe her explanations, not anymore. "We came back," she said finally. The house was empty. Yes. You sold it? No, I said calmly. I moved out. The house was never yours to return to. Another pause, sharper now. Eric says this is about punishment. Is that what this is? I took a slow breath, looked out at the yard. The rose bush was blooming again. 3 blossoms now. Not large, not perfect, but open. No, I said. It's about clarity. She scoffed. You just disappeared. You didn't even say goodbye. I didn't need to. You already had. Her silence this time was longer. You could have told me, she said. You didn't have to make it like this. You left me in a strange house with no phone, no plan, no care for what might happen. And now you're upset I didn't leave you a note? You're twisting things. No, I said. I'm straightening them. I heard her inhale. The kind of inhale people do before they demand control. You don't have the right. I do, I said, gently but firmly, because I never stopped being your mother. But you, Lisa, you stopped being my daughter the moment you decided I was furniture. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shallow, quick. She wanted to fight. I wasn't giving her the rhythm. What do you even want? She snapped. To live out there with strangers? To die alone in a house no one cares about? No, I said, watching Teresa walk by with a stack of folded dish towels. I'm not alone. You don't have family there. Yes, I do. She made a sound, somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. You've completely lost it. No, I said. For the first time in years, I've found something. What? Myself. She hung up. I didn't cry. Later that day, I walked to the end of the driveway where the mailbox stood. Inside, a single envelope, handwritten, no stamp. Just Mom in the middle. I opened it. No apology. Just a list of demands, house keys, boxes, a storage unit she wanted access to, and a sentence. You made this worse than it had to be. I folded it once, then again, then slid it into the trash. Gloria found me in the garden later. You all right? I am, I said. You look lighter. I am that too. That night, we sat on the porch, the 3 of us. It was warm, but not stifling. Fireflies flickered near the fence. Gloria had brought out a pot of chamomile tea. Teresa hummed something tuneless, but sweet. You think she'll try to come back? Teresa asked. Maybe, I said, but I'm not waiting. Gloria raised her cup. To not waiting. We all drank. Behind us, the house glowed with soft yellow light. No instructions, no demands. Just the quiet rhythm of women reclaiming space. Not borrowed, not begged for. Owned, chosen, kept. We never called it a home for women, never gave it a name. But slowly, quietly, the house began to fill. After Gloria and Teresa came Ruth. She arrived with a limp and a navy suitcase patched with duct tape. Her son had left her in a motel after Thanksgiving. Said he'd be back by morning. That was 6 months ago. He didn't mean it to be cruel, she told us. He just didn't know how to say he was finished. She brought a tin of sewing needles and a book of crossword puzzles, and by the 2nd week, she had mended every torn curtain in the house and taught Teresa how to do French seams. She kept to herself mostly, but every Sunday she made soup and left it warming on the stove with a note that simply said, "If you're hungry, I'm here." We added a table to the kitchen to make room for 4, then 5. By spring, the house had become its own rhythm. We didn't hold meetings or pass rules. Things just happened. If you took the last of the jam, you bought more. If someone was crying in the garden, you brought tea before you asked questions. I had a small wooden sign made, not large, just enough, and nailed it above the porch. You belong here. No last names, no expectations, just a promise. Sometimes the neighbours watched us, the ones who'd been here long before we reappeared. They stared from their porches or slowed their cars near the sidewalk. Once, a woman in a beige SUV rolled down her window and called out, "Is this one of those care homes?" "No," I said. "This is one of those freedom homes." She frowned like that didn't make sense and drove off. We planted herbs in the backyard: mint, basil, rosemary. Each woman chose one. Ruth talked to hers like it was a child. Teresa played the radio for hers. Gloria sprayed hers with diluted whiskey and said it kept the bugs honest. We cooked together. Not every night, but often enough that we knew each other's preferences. Teresa didn't like onions. Ruth ate slowly and hated being asked if she was finished. Gloria insisted on real butter and refused margarine on moral grounds. We laughed, not like girls, but like women who'd earned the right. Deep, full laughter that didn't ask permission. It echoed in the hallway and folded into the wallpaper like a blessing. One afternoon, I caught sight of myself in the mirror by the stairs. I paused. Not at the lines on my face or the softness around my jaw, but at how still I looked. Not rigid, not guarded, just still. I hadn't realized how long I'd been braced for impact. Now there was no impact, just life, unfolding without apology. That evening, I brewed tea and sat on the back steps with a blanket across my lap. The sun was low, casting long shadows. The roses were blooming more fully now. 12 blossoms, strong and stubborn. Ruth sat beside me. "Do you think they regret it?" she asked. "Who?" "The children. The ones who let us go." I thought for a moment. "Maybe," I said. "But regret is quiet, and pride is louder." She nodded. "I don't want them to regret me," she said. "I just want them to remember I was more than laundry and errands." "You were," I said. "You are." The porch light flicked on behind us. The screen door creaked. Gloria's voice floated through. "There's shortbread, if anyone's still awake." We rose, slowly, like women who no longer needed to rush. Inside, the house was warm with lamplight and soft conversation. No one said grace. But somehow we were living in it. They never thought I would leave. That's the part I keep circling back to. Not the cruelty, not even the silence, but the certainty. They thought I would stay because I always had, because women like me do, but I didn't. And I won't again. The house is quiet this morning, but not empty. I sit at the kitchen table with a cup of mint tea, the air heavy with the scent of rosemary from the garden. Ruth is humming softly as she folds towels in the sunroom. Teresa is writing another postcard, this one addressed to no one. Gloria's slippers scuff gently on the stairs. We don't talk about where we came from, not every day. Sometimes the stories surface in pieces, onion skin thin, translucent with pain. A whispered, "He said I was too much," or "She forgot my birthday 4 years in a row." But mostly, we talk about now, the plants, the bread, the weather, the fact that we made it here. Because we did. We made it. I walk out to the front porch, tea in hand, and settle into the chair with the worn cushion. The wood creaks beneath me like it remembers all the women who sat here before. The morning sun is warm on my knees. I watch as a small bird lands on the railing, tilts its head, and flies off again. That's how this feels, like remembering you have wings. Lisa called once more last week. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message, just a name blinking on the screen. But I didn't feel that old guilt twist in my stomach. Just peace. She'll find her way, or she won't. But I've already found mine. The deed is still in my name. But the home is shared. No rent, no ledgers, no apologies, just space and time and kindness, which is more radical than people think. We built something here, without blueprints, without permission. We built it out of the pieces we weren't allowed to keep in other homes. The soft voice, the stubborn recipe, the cardigan with holes, the memory no one else bothered to ask about. We built it out of absence and filled it with laughter. Sometimes women write to me now, handwritten letters, emails if they're brave. One said, "I thought I was crazy until I read your story." Another wrote, "I've been quiet for 42 years. I think I'm ready to speak." I answer everyone, slowly, carefully, because I know how dangerous silence can be when it's misnamed as peace. They ask, "What should I do?" I tell them, "You already know. And if you're reading this, maybe you do too. Maybe you've been told you're too much, or not enough. Maybe you were asked to step aside, to be flexible, to make room for the ones who didn't leave you any. Maybe you've been invisible so long, you forgot you used to shine. Let me say this plainly. You are not a burden. You are not a guest in your own life. You are not someone to be managed or softened or hidden. You are a whole woman, with a voice that still matters and a presence that still shifts rooms. And if they can't see it, you build your own room. You build your own porch. You build your own morning. That's what we did here, quietly, fiercely. And if you've ever wanted to do the same, if you've ever whispered, "I wish someone knew," then this is your place, your home now. Subscribe to Grandma's Untold Stories. Here we don't yell, we remember. Here, silence isn't obedience, it's recovery. Here, justice drinks tea, wears soft slippers, and takes up space on purpose. Welcome in.